Good evening everyone, and welcome to Kindred. My name is Anna Lameiras, and I'm honored to be your moderator today for this important conversation on inclusion, health, and well-being. Today we are here as part of the Inclusive Circle, a platform dedicated to fostering meaningful dialogues around accessibility, empowerment, health, and the well-being of individuals with disabilities. Its mission is to ensure that every person, regardless of ability, has access to the resources, support, and opportunities they need to thrive. Health and well-being are deeply personal journeys, yet one thing remains universal: having the right mindset, the right support, and knowledge can transform lives. As a mindset coach, an educator, and an advocate for mental health and well-being, I've seen firsthand how resilience, self-awareness, and the right support system can empower individuals to navigate challenges and unlock their full potential. My work focuses on helping athletes and professionals build confidence, develop emotional intelligence, and harness their strengths. However, this is something that applies to every individual, regardless of their background and circumstances. With that in mind, I'm delighted to introduce you this amazing panel, incredible speakers, leaders in sport, medicine, advocacy, and mental health, who bring unique expertise and lived experience to this conversation. Anne Wafula-Strike is a Paralympian author and disability advocate dedicated to inclusion, mobility, and education for disabled individuals worldwide. The author of In My Dreams, I Dance. As the first sub-Saharan African wheelchair racer to compete at the Paralympics 2004, she uses her platform to inspire others to overcome challenges and reach their full potential. Through her Olympia Wafula Foundation, Anne promotes healthy living resolutions and social inclusion across the UK and globally. Honored with an MBE in 2014, she continues to champion accessibility, empowerment, and equal opportunities for all. Welcome, Anne. Professor Nick Webber is a leading expert in Paralympic sports, medicine, and disability health. After sustaining a spinal cord injury while serving as a doctor in the Royal Air Force, his rehabilitation journey inspired him in specializing sports and exercise medicine. He has since attended 13 Paralympic Games, served as Chief Medical Officer for Paralympics GB, London 2012, and is chair of British Paralympic Association. Recognized with a CBE for services to sport and medicine, Nick is passionate about health, injury prevention, and accessibility for disabled individuals. A former GB wheelchair tennis player, he remains active through sport and fitness. Welcome, Nick. Dr. Peter Hills, a former general practitioner, commissioned board member in Southwest London, and GP trainer and appraiser, is the training director with For Mental Health. He manages and reaccredits a team of trainers and maintains a library of research, evidence, and best practice on the subjects of suicide, self-harm, resilience, compassion, and other topics related to mental health. He supports the delivery and development of the Connecting with People Train the Trainer programs, conferences, and module workshops across several countries. He has also developed 4 mental health remote training expertise with safety, impact, and governance as priorities. His other skills relate to self-management and development of personal strengths and empowerment. Welcome, Peter. As Chief Brand Officer at Sunflower, Annette Smeller drives global marketing marketing and advocacy for people with non-apparent disabilities. With over 20 years of experience in brand strategy and design, she has led impactful initiatives across finance, technology, and social impact sectors. Passionate about inclusion and accessibility, Annette works to break down barriers, social, virtual, and environmental, ensuring that accessibility is the norm, not the exception. A dedicated advocate and speaker, she champions disability awareness, believing that small acts of kindness can create lasting change. Welcome, Annette. To kick off our discussion, let's talk about the crucial role of design and accessibility. For individuals with disabilities, thoughtful design isn't just about convenience. It's about dignity, independence, and in many cases, prevention of serious health issues. One key area where design makes a significant impact is in the preventative pressure source. Focused design can mean the difference between comfort and chronic pain, or even long-term medical complications. Anne, I'm coming to you. As a former Paralympian and advocate, what do you think are the biggest gaps in accessibility, especially in public transport? What are the government implement strategies that you think are effective, and what areas are the lack of it?
Thank you. I don't know whether the mic is on. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I think, do you know, when we talk about independence, self-independent or moving from A to B, we really mean that access should be right. And when I look at your question, I think, to me, first of all, what I'd like to say is the accessibility gap is growing. A few years ago they said that disabled people make 38% fewer journeys than non-disabled people. This was a few years ago, but I'm told that this statistic is even higher. And I think, to me, maybe some of the things that not just the government, but the organizations that are commissioned, or the organizations that the government is trusting to run some of these transport modes or models in the country, they should actually work with disabled people on board. We always say, I don't know if you've heard the phrase, nothing about us without us, because we have all the answers about us. And I think, to me, just some of the areas where I feel that we've been let down so much is information and communication, or should I just sort of say communication technology. And this could be visual or voice, which sometimes, I don't know, when you are traveling, in train stations, and you kind of hear somebody speaking, through the mic, but you can't really know what they've said, and you ask yourself, what about that person who's got, an hearing challenge? How are they even getting it? Those are some of the things that are actually frustrating and annoying. If you look at the statistics, and history tells us that the London bus network is one of the most accessible in the entire world. I don't know whether you know that, but it's one of the accessible in the entire world. Every bus in London is wheelchair accessible. Did you know that? Literally every bus in London is wheelchair accessible, and 95% of bus stops are step-free. But let me tell you where the problem is, or where the challenge is. The attitude of the driver sometimes. You've heard people complaining that, the driver just did not stop to put the ramp out because I was in a wheelchair and it was raining. Or some people will say to you, do you know what, because I was waiting with my guide dog the taxi couldn't even bother, or the taxi just drove through, because they saw me with a guide dog. So, the attitude is a barrier. It doesn't matter how much we have all this infrastructure in place. Attitudes of people who are leading or running this, these modes has to change. And I think we have to do a lot of work to educate and also work with them. But also it's a challenge to navigate most of these accessible bus stops. When, for example, they say a bus stop is accessible. Yes, that bus stop, for example, is accessible, but how do you get there? As a wheelchair user, someone with a white cane or someone with a guide dog, that is also a challenge. So lack of accessible information about routes, schedules, or especially when there are delays or when there are breakdowns, this is a big problem. And yes, I know the government is working with disabled organizations to make this right. But the challenge that we have is sometimes we make 10 steps forward and we take several steps back, and that becomes a challenge. So just to sum up that, that question, I'm just going to read some specific, and these are specific concerns quickly. Train users face the most barriers, with 91% reporting at least one barrier. That is big. Bus users also face significant barriers, with 90% reporting at least one barrier. 41% of disabled people encounter difficulties in reaching their destination due to accessibility issues. And this one is also shocking. 55% of people with mobility issues or learning disabilities, 58 of those with hearing loss, and 64 for those with sight loss encounter these issues. So the percentage is still really high.
Anne, do you mind if I comment on what you're saying? So you were talking about buses in London, but just want to relay that a few months after I was born, which is quite a long time ago now, there was a lady called Rosa Parks who refused to be segregated on the basis of race on a bus. But we are segregated by design, and on the train I came up on today to speak here, there's a place for me next to the toilet on Southern Railways, which usually is broken and smelly, whereas as a wheelchair user I have to go. I can't access other areas of the train. I have to have someone with a ramp to put me on it because the design of the train, the access to the platform has not been appropriate. So it is segregation by design. So we need to think about how do we make inclusive design for all aspects of transportation, not just to help wheelchair users, but those with limited mobility, with children, with bikes. If we think about the inclusive world, it makes it better for everyone and not just for people with wheelchair use. But I always think back to Rosa Parks and what she did and stood up for, and that we must equally stand up for our rights too.
Thank you, thank you. It is very important to have these informed decisions and all this information, so that it goes back to education and how we can support like you said, Nick, not just the wheelchair users, but everyone. Nick, I'm coming to you now. As a chair of the British Paralympic Association and a doctor, you have extensive experience in health and well-being for disabled individuals. What are some key preventative health measures that disabled people can take to avoid common issues like pressure sores, bladder infections, and other health complications? And what advice would you give for maintaining overall well-being and an active, healthy lifestyle despite the additional challenges people with disability face?
Wow, have we got a couple of hours to talk through this?
We could stay all night.
So, I was a doctor when I was injured back in 1981 and had a spinal cord injury, and so hugely traumatic event for me physically and psychologically to adapt to that. was working in the Air Force, and I went to a place called Headley Court, which was a rehabilitation unit that the services had, and I saw the power of team and rehabilitation in someone's life. And then I have a passion for sport. I always have since a kid and all my life. And I was asked to help out with the British Paralympic Association. And what I saw was people coming along to competitions and firefighting problems with athletes and not thinking about prevention. And that basically started my career in terms of sports medicine and working over the last 30 odd years with the British Paralympic Association and looking at how do you prevent the health complications that occur with someone with a disability in life and in sport, because the two things are never separated. An athlete is an athlete for 10% of their time, and 90% of the time they're a person just like everybody else, doing, getting a train, going to bed, going to get to the supermarket, all these things. So the issues that face athletes are very similar to everybody else. And so I started initially working with the British team, trying to look at prevention. My first games was at Atlanta in 1996, and it was the heat and how we're going to combat the heat, and so specific issues for particular different impairments. But gradually, as I became known as this annoying brick doctor who kept asking the IBC about what they were going to do about this, that, and the other, they decided to invite me onto the medical committee. And in 2001, I did that, and I started. I said, right, I want to survey the injuries and illnesses that occur at games time to understand what's happening to athletes, so we can then put in preventive measures to start to try and reduce the health burden on individuals and teams and so on. And the challenges that you see are impairment specific, so it may be bladder infections for people with neuropathic bladder, for spinal cord injury, or it may be skin breakdown in amputees who are running and chafing the skin and the prosthetic. But actually, most of the issues that people have are the same issues that everybody has. When I look at games-related illnesses or injuries, top of the list is always upper respiratory tract infection, and then it's gastrointestinal infection, and then with the Paralympics you get urinary tract infection, skin breakdown, things like this. And COVID taught us so much. We got exposed to this extraordinary event of the coronavirus pandemic, and we all started washing our hands and doing things like that. We actually started thinking about where we coughed or what we did and how we communicated with people and so on. And it's extraordinary because we saw in Tokyo, when we had the Paralympic Games in Tokyo in 2020, that the preventive measures we were taking and forced to take to reduce the risk of COVID infection also reduced the risk of urinary tract infection, because people were actually washing their hands more frequently and less contamination of catheters. They were having less gastrointestinal infection again. So we suddenly all became experts in in this area. But it's been brilliant because it has taught us a lot. But there are specific things you can think about and you can do. So let's have a think of a few of those. First of all, vitamin D deficiency. I was talking to Anne earlier, and she was showing me a picture of her x-rays. I'm allowed to talk about this now. And how her osteoporotic spine and pelvis were having major issues. But probably about 50% of the whole population have low vitamin D levels during the winter months in the UK. So me, I supplement from October to March every year with vitamin D, because it has an effect on bone health, but actually has an effect on your immune system as well. It affects your ability to combat respiratory tract infection. What else do? I use vitamin C, not particularly to prevent colds, because there is some evidence about reduction of colds or duration of colds if you have a cold. But for me, it helps in reduce the frequency of important part in our health and well-being, not just on our gut. And I was reading a really interesting paper about spinal cord injury and the effect of the microbiome and dysbiosis and how constipation, bloating and so on is associated with this. But on mental health in relation to its interaction with muscles. And as people with disabilities, we generally tend to get more issues that require antibiotics to be taken, which then affects your gut bacteria adversely, and that has effects on a variety of things. So I take kefir yogurt generally in the mornings if I can. I may use, there are other forms of that, but I also take probiotic capsules because if I can enhance my gut well-being and my microbiome, that can have significant positive effects on a variety of different things, from my neural system, my mental health, my gut, and my ability to combat infection. You may not know that there's a substance called IgA, immunoglobulin A, which is the first thing in your mouth, in your eyes, and your nose, which is your barrier to infection, which deals with the bugs and things that when you meet them, when someone sneezes upon you, the first thing that combats it is secretory IgA. And 90% of that is produced in the gut by your microbiome in the gut. And enhancing that can help improve your secretory IgA. There was a great study done at Loughborough University where I have an honorary professorship there in sport and exercise medicine, where they looked at endurance athletes who were working exceedingly hard over the winter and looking at their levels of secretory IgA and looking at their incidence of colds, because endurance athletes, triathletes, endurance runners tend to, in the winter, get struck down with lots more colds and viral infections. And so by boosting that with probiotics, they managed to reduce the frequency of colds and other upper respiratory tract infections in athletes. So there's a lot we can do, which is fairly simple, but we need to think about it. So simple things we can do. And I'll shut up for now and talk a bit more later about some other things. But one preamble to that is exercise. And I'll come on to that because there's a guy called William Buchan said in 1792, I think it was, exercise is no less necessary than food for the preservation of health. And that might seem a bit strong, but I think exercise is really, really important, and more important for people with a disability than able-bodied people. And what we have to work out is the mode of exercise, what type of exercise, and how we have access to it, and what accessibility in your community is there to do that. We all need to be doing some of it. So that's all for now.
Well, that was very, very interesting. I was taking some notes here as I have two athletes at home, and it's extremely important. And again, vitamin D is one of the things we do at home, but very interesting facts. Now, mental health and resilience play a crucial role in well-being. Beyond physical challenges, the emotional and psychological aspects of daily life often go unnoticed. Let's explore how we can better support mental health and build resilience in the face of adversity. Peter.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate that question, and I'm going to take a little bit of a risk because I'm actually going to say a lot of things that I'm sure you know already. I mean, I'm going to start from the point that each of us is unique. Each of us is an individual. That's what defines all of us in the room here today. And so therefore, our needs, how they need to be addressed, for each of us is unique and individual, and makes us each special in the way that we are. And one of the things that one starts to think about is what can one draw on to understand what our needs are. And of course some of that is past experience, is what we've experienced over the past months, the past years, whatever they may be. And of course the the other things that we can draw on is the challenges that we're dealing with in the moment, in the current moment, in this present day. Plus, also thinking about an anticipation of the future. What are the challenges that are going to face us, each one of us, as we go forward? And I think the thing that I'm saying is that I think for many of us, not for all of us, I don't want to make assumptions, it's almost a passive process. We're not necessarily thinking about it, we're just existing day on day, minute on minute, hour on hour. And that's absolutely fine. But actually, if we can turn that into something very, very conscious, then there's things that we can do above and beyond what we're doing now, potentially. And of course, the key thing there is the learning that we take away from what we're experiencing ourselves in the past, now, currently, in the future, but also what others' experiences are as well, and what they can share with us. Because of course we can learn from anybody around us, whoever they are. Some of the things we can learn from them, well, I'm not doing that, for example, but I might do that. And of course, alongside that, when we have those experiences, is really consciously thinking about what has gone well, what has worked. I mean, it sounds really obvious, but do we do that consciously? And in my experience, most people are not consciously doing that. But if we do, then we've got something that we may want to do again. Or there might be things that we do that have very little benefit to us, whatever that means to each one of us here today. So is that something that will continue? Or maybe we won't, because actually it's wasting our energies. We could be looking at something else. And of course, I'm going to say the obvious. There might be things that we experience, that we've done, that we go, well, I'm not going to do that again, because that really didn't work and it made the situation worse. So again, we're learning from this as we go. And I'm making this very generic and wide and broad, because again, for each of us, that will be something very, very different. I'm going to ask us also to think about this I'm just going to share two ways of thinking about this. And it really goes back to something I've said, is if there is something that we do currently in our everyday lives that really aren't working for us, we should really consider stop doing that. Or look at it again and maybe do it in a different way. So generally what our experiences are and what works and what doesn't. But of course those things that do work for us, we want to continue that. Be really conscious and aware. This has worked for me when I do this. Now, things do change. So things that work today may not work tomorrow, but at least if they're working today, I'm going to use that. I'm going to continue doing that. Maybe do more of that, because it really is benefiting me. Whether it's our well-being, whether it's physically, whether it's emotionally, psychologically, mentally, we're going to continue doing that. But of course, there's the other things that we don't know about yet, and we need to discover, and that's where the learning comes. That's where it's an active process, where we're looking around us, we're asking people questions. What do you think? Do you think I'm doing the right thing? It's always good to sort of test things with other people around us who we trust, people who have our confidence. And if that's the case, new ideas, new ways of doing things might emerge. And of course, that's why we're here today, to learn all these things from each other, from the five of us here today, Samantha, all the people, all of you here in the room today. The other perspective on reflecting is using some work from a guy called Stephen Covey, who you may have heard of, the sort of circle of influence. I'm sure some of us have come across that. It's another way of looking at it. So one of the things that I've noticed, and I think you've noticed, that sometimes we push very, very hard against something that can't be moved. And we spend a long time pushing on it, and a long time draining our energy. And if it is something that we can't change, we can't move, we can't do something with, probably the best thing is to walk away from it, and not waste our energies on it. In fact, the best thing to do is to start to reflect on what's in my direct control. What can I do for myself? What can I do that's not dependent on someone else? Whatever that thing is. But of course, we also depend on having an influence on the world around us. Again, some of the conversations we're having today. So we can't guarantee that we'll change something, but certainly that's where we can put our energies to see what can we influence, what can we change, what can we make a difference for our benefit, but also for the benefit of others around us. So the things that we influence and you influence, and we're trying to influence, you're influencing every day, can make a difference to somebody else's life as well, which is very powerful. So I was asked to speak a little bit about wellbeing plans. We're getting there. This is the preamble is all about a process to develop a plan. And a plan sounds like a very sort of two-dimensional, put a pen to paper kind of thing. And on the surface it is, but basically a plan allows us to develop our ideas, develop our thinking, that support, for example, our well-being. Those things that help us to cope, those things that make us feel good, those things that we enjoy, those things that allow us to do more things than we would normally do, those things that give us a positive feeling about life. Actually, not just a positive feeling, but also an ability to cope with the challenges as they come along. So there are ways of doing that. As we discover things, we can start to think, what practically is going to work for me? What emotionally is going to work for me? Is it about maybe finances? Is it about the things we were talking about already, about access and things like that? So all of these things, so that we can cope with those challenges that come along in our lives. Now, some challenges may be bigger than that, but if we've discovered a whole range of strategies with which we can use day in, day out, that change with time, but follow us, that almost are like, if you like, it's like putting money in a piggy bank. It shows my age talking about piggy banks, which normally if you take the money out, we spent it. But these are ideas that we can keep using and reusing each time that can benefit us, but always thinking about, well, what else do I need to put in there? What new ideas do I need to develop? And the thing about planning as well is it's never too late to do it. I mean, what I found over the years is that people are more likely to produce plans and ideas in a crisis, because obviously that's the moment where we really need things to happen. But actually, if you work backwards from that, if you can think ahead, what would I do if these situations arose? Taking into account what we're dealing with currently, but things that we can anticipate in the future, so that if a crisis, a more complex moment we're challenged with, that actually we've got things in place already. One example of that is that if one wants to sort of float or swim in a river, for example, that if we don't have the ability to swim, or we don't have the ability to float, or we don't have the aids with us to be able to do that, or we haven't really thought about what it's like to be in a river, we might be able to do it, but actually it's a much better place if we've anticipated it and thought about it. And that goes for all the kind of challenges that we might come across. So I suppose the basic principle here, the core thing, is to be really conscious and aware of things that have worked in the past, things that are working now, things that can benefit in the future if one can anticipate those, so that when we come to a situation where we are challenged, or just those everyday challenges we're dealing with, we've got things that we can use. If you like, they are things that sit in our toolbox to help us to get through minute on minute, hour on hour, day by day, and beyond. Thank you.
I agree. It's all about reflection and evaluation. Nick, I'm coming to you now. As a doctor and athlete, how does the Paralympic classification system impact athletes' mental and physical well-being?
Whoa. Okay. Are you aware about classification in parasport, or shall I give it a kind of a brief? So there are currently 22 sports on the Paralympic programme, and to participate in one of those sports you need to meet the minimum impairment criteria. So they have 8 physical impairments, they have sensory impairments, which are visual impairments, and also intellectual impairment. So each sport federation determines kind of the bar above which you need to be included. once you're above that bar, you then have to separate people by the level of impairment to make it fair sporting competition. So to do that, you have to have your medical details given to the federation. There's a classification panel which includes medical and technical aspects, and they look at you, they examine you physically, and then they look at you in performing the skill which you need to do, and they decide which class you will then compete in. And that's quite challenging. So I played wheelchair tennis for Great Britain, and because I have some weakness in my upper limbs, I had a cervical injury, it was incomplete, so I've got some movement below the level of lesion, but I also have still some impairment in my hands and weakness there. I was then put into what's called the quad class. There's an open class for people with lower limb impairments, and then people with upper limb impairments are a different class. But at one point in that process, they said I didn't meet the criteria, and I'm going, what do you mean? You know, I know I've had a spinal injury, I know what level it's at, I can see, you know, can you not see? And it was, the process can be really, really stressful for people. It is the thing which means, are you faking this? You know, so there's one element of that. There's, it can be the difference between being a world champion and a no-hoper and not getting funded. So it's absolutely critically important. And classification underpins the validity of the whole Paralympic movement. Sport needs to be competition that you can believe in. You can see it's fair, that this person competing against that person is a fair, you know, that looks like a fair competition. So, you know, if you've got a person with, you know, a foot amputation against someone with bilateral, you know, above knee amputations, you might go, that doesn't look quite right. And if they're put in the same race, you're thinking, is that okay? So that's the purpose of classification. So it's exceedingly stressful for athletes to ensure that it's right. But if we think about the history and the evolution of the Paralympic movement, it's come from a very medical background of doctors and physios looking at someone. And when it started, it was purely with people with spinal cord injury. So it was quite easy in the old days to say, you're a T4 paraplegic, you're in this group. You're an L1 paraplegic, you've got a different level of ability or disability, so you can be in this group. But the movement became more inclusive. It had people with, you know, cerebral palsy, people with limb deficiency, and then this group of other things which they call les autres, which means the other lot in French, which makes it sound a little bit more acceptable. But it was being inclusive in terms of different people with different impairments, but it made it much more complex in trying to make equal competition. And that is the challenge for the movement, to professionalize that, to put more science behind it, to make it fair for both the athlete, but to make it so that the viewing public can see that this is fair and good competition.
If I may sort of just agree with what Dr. Nick has been saying, is classification is key to Paralympic sport. And as the movement has grown, Nick, I know it's fair to say that those with high needs, you know, those people with sort of like maybe who have higher disabilities, have been disadvantaged, because, you know, you sort of like want to group 20 people in one category, and then you realize that in that category you only pick those ones who are less able, or sort of like, you know, who are slightly better off disability-wise than the others. So I think that is something that maybe IPC is looking to address, just to make sure that those ones who will go and win a medal in a certain category or in a certain classification are the athletes that will be funded, and they are the athletes who will make a team. So it means that if you are not around there, then you are around here. But you know, like as a Paralympian, what I always say to people is that not every disabled person will be a Paralympian. And that does not mean that we should not play sport, that we shouldn't participate in sport. You know, just the way Nick you said, exercising is key and it's very, very important. So I think every person should be allowed and should be able to access some sort of activities.
And you're absolutely right. And people don't look at able-bodied in the street and go, why aren't you an Olympian? You know, when we had the Superhuman campaign in 2012, people think, oh, I've got a disability, but I'm not a Paralympian, you know, that makes me look bad. No, definitely not. You don't expect everyone who doesn't have a disability to be an Olympian. And we just, it's just reframing it, as you were saying, Peter, about how we view things and reframe it and reflect on it is really, really important. But in terms of the process, we need to keep refining it, keep improving it, get more science behind it, and making it fair competition and fair for the athlete.
Can I just, quick question if I may, how many people are part of this classification system? Like what's the process like of how many people decide that?
So there will be a chief classifier who oversees the whole international. So there's classification at a national level, where national classifiers will assess you and allocate a class. But then to compete at an international level, you have to go to the international classifiers. So you may have to travel to an international competition to see someone, and there will be a team of 2 or 3 people, depending on the sport, who will assess you from a physical perspective, a sporting perspective, and increasingly they're looking at your performance during competition and reflecting on that to see whether it actually reflects what you saw on your physical examination, because obviously people could try and fool the system. If they could push very fast on the court during play, but couldn't manage to do it during the assessment. So there's that element of reflection and assessment in competition too.
Thank you. Thank you. Annette, coming to you now. Can you tell us more about the Hidden Disabilities Sunflower Program and why is it important? What impact does Hidden Disabilities Sunflower have on reducing stress and improving daily life for people with hidden disabilities?
No, thank you. Probably the first place to start is to explain what the sunflower is for people who don't know. So I'm wearing a sunflower lanyard. It's a yellow sunflower on a green background, and essentially it's a tool for someone with a non-visible disability or condition or chronic illness to indicate that they may need some support. So it takes the conversation away from disability to what kind of support can we give to that person to take part in society. So it started at Gatwick in 2016 when their accessibility team recognised that there were people coming through the airport who needed support but didn't have a visible disability. So we worked with them to develop a symbol that people could use to show that they needed that support. And we trialled it there, it was really successful, and since then it's expanded globally. If you look at aviation, it's now recognised in 300 airports with 19 airlines, but it's really across every sector. So we worked with Special Olympics in Berlin, FIFA Women's World Cup in terms of sport, and with from grassroots sport all the way through to football teams and stadiums around the country. But we're also services. We've recently done a partnership with Lego, so it was the first toy that represented non-visible disabilities, and they've got sets and you can get minifigures with the sunflower on.
Fantastic.
It's incredible. We worked with MasterCard in Singapore to raise awareness around autism. It's a well-recognised symbol that people use. It's a choice to use it. We don't ask for any proof of disability on the premise that some people will not have a diagnosis for years and they may need the support during that time, or they may never get a diagnosis but they need support because they've got a situational or a temporary disability. In terms of the impact that it has on mental well-being and or has a meaningful impact and how it can help to improve daily interactions, it's about, it goes back to your point about being unique, and everybody has a unique experience of the barriers that they face when they take part in society. It's about having, making connections. So wearing the sunflower means that you're indicating, you have the ability to indicate that you need that support when you choose to do so without having to repeatedly justify why you need that support. So for instance, going through an airport, you hit those individuals within, we call them sunflower-friendly businesses, to respect that person and to ask that person who's wearing the sunflower what they need, and to be individuality. It's about uniqueness and it's about control.
I love that, and I love that Lego. That is such a popular toy that it took that forward. I really do love that. Peter, can you explain what a safety plan is and how it can support individuals in distress, particularly those who have experienced suicidal thoughts or self-harm?
Yeah, sure, I'll be very happy to do that. Can I slide one thing quickly in before that, because it's one of the things, even before thinking about safety plans and wellbeing plans, that I've sort of touched on. I didn't say safety plans, but I will talk about that in a moment. I was going to compassion. I had a conversation just before we started about compassion, and Anne sort of highlighted something about how important it is that when you get onto a bus, it's not necessarily about the physical access, it's about the attitudes of people around you and how important compassion is. And we are a society that maybe mentions the word but doesn't always really know what it is, or knows what it is but doesn't necessarily apply it. Sometimes the language that we use is really key as well. It can be quite stigmatizing, of course, and upsetting, triggering, all those things that may lead to somebody's distress. And it was a book written back in 1995 that was absolutely full of compassionate definitions and phrases and thinking. That said compassion is just simply noticing the suffering of somebody else, but also at the same time noticing it in yourself and just having that commitment to want to do something about that suffering. And I think if we walked around in society with that kind of thought in our minds and spread the word, the interesting thing about compassion as well, as the years have gone on and it's been looked at, is that actually compassionate spaces not only relieve suffering, but they prevent it as well. So, you know, it's really, if you want to look at some of the work of Professor Paul Gilbert's, it's very interesting writing around compassion. Because obviously if we meet people in distress or talk to people in distress, then we need to have compassion that's kind. We heard about acts of kindness kind of conversations. And then if we're going to support somebody, or because actually quite a very powerful way of developing wellbeing plans and safety plans is to be able to do it with somebody else, you know, somebody that we trust, somebody, or it might be, to be honest, I have a story of somebody who said actually the people that I trusted most were people on buses that didn't know me, and then I'd ask their opinion on what they think I should do, and they go, well, I don't know you, but how about this? And then said, oh, that's a really great idea, maybe I'll take that away. So I'll talk a little bit about the overlap between wellbeing and safety. So the strategies that I sort of alluded to earlier on that we can develop that support our well-being, our ability to get through each day, cope with each day's stresses and challenges that they come along, if they're sort of manageable with our own strategies and the support and help of those around us that know us, care about us, understand us, doing all those things that make us feel good. I suppose one of the ways of describing well-being might be if we're travelling in a car, that actually supporting our well-being is just getting the seat how we need it, getting the temperature of the car just right, and putting the radio on that channel that's best for us, the temperature. That sort of state of I'm feeling I'm going to have a better experience today because of all these things that I can do that are just going to give me a better experience. It might be, for example, and I can't really show it to you, a photo on the front of your phone, for example, that you just reminds you of a beautiful moment in your life, a fantastic day that I had one day, for example. All of these things sort of can get us through those moments and support our well-being. But sometimes the challenges are greater than that. Sometimes they're pushing us, they're overwhelming us. And so how do we deal with that? How do we cope with that? And that's where safety planning may be the next body of thinking, really. Because actually now we need to get through a situation safely. It's not just feeling good and positive, which is all great and we should still experience that, but it's how do we get through this much more challenging, overwhelming situation. So one of the things we might think about is how do we get through the situation right now? What are the immediate things that are going to help me? So that might be things that we can do ourselves, but it might also be external inputs, of course, that we need from other people around us. It might be, much like well-being, just a really powerful memory or thought that we can put in our head straight away that just breaks that pain of that sensation we're experiencing at that moment. So how do we get through right now? The other thing is, how do we make our situation safer? I mean, there's a myriad of things, again, going back to individual and unique, that are the things that you know that are ways of getting through a situation safely, which again might be the external inputs that we have from other people, the people we can phone up, the people we reach out to, the calls we can make, the people that are going to support and help us. But then there's other things, is how do we, when we're feeling overwhelmed, relax ourselves? What are the things that work for us? So again, this is about discovery. We need to think consciously, how do I relax? How do I lift my mood? Is it things that I can do? Is it memories and things that I can recall? Is it anticipations of positive things in the future? Is it things that I do of value? Or is it the people that can help us to relax and lift our mood again? One of the other things that we can think about is what can distract us. So it's very powerful for me, distraction. One of the things in my own safety plan, and please feel free to laugh at this, is putting headphones on and putting a song called The Trooper by Iron Maiden at maximum volume, enough to hurt my ears, but enough to distract from the pain of the other sensation that I don't want to feel. So the pain of the trooper takes away the pain of the thing that's really affecting me. And distraction, there's all sorts of things that we can discover about distraction, which is interesting. But of course the other aspects are the people, the other people in our lives. Who do we reach out to? Who do we call? Who notices? It might be somebody that notices, talking about the sunflower, there might be, noticing that this is somebody who needs support and needs whatever they might be. And that might be a friend, a family member, it might be somebody in your community, it might be somebody walking down the street who notices. But actually there might be very specific people that you can identify and that they become part of your safety plan. Who can you call in the middle of the night? Who can you call in the day? I've got people in my safety plan who I don't call up to discuss the details about the terrible things going on in my head, but they just take my mind off stuff. But then there are a few people in my safety plan who I do talk about everything that's going on in my head. So think who those specific people are, how you get hold of them, when. And then the other things is who do you call out to who has that expertise? So if life is becoming so challenging, how do I go on? How do I get through this next second, this next minute, this next hour? Is knowing where to reach out. And that might be the Samaritans, it might be Mind, it might be Rethink, it might be your local friendly neighbourhood GP, who I used to be a friendly neighbourhood GP, but I'm I'm still friendly, but I'm not a GP anymore. Who are these people that I can reach out to where I really need that immediate help? Where maybe your buddies, your friends, your family members, actually, they just don't know what to do. This is just beyond, but I can be here, support you, hold you, nurture you, love you, but actually you need expert help. Or where do you go in emergencies, the other thing? What are the numbers that you call? Who is it that you call, which is the blue light, if you like, the emergency. The thing about going through all those things is that these are the nudge thinking that can form up a safety plan. And I'm going to mention a couple of resources that might be, they're not the answer to everything, but they might support the kind of thinking of what I've been talking about, developing wellbeing and developing safety plans, a wellbeing plan. One of them is called wellbeingandcoping.net. It's free to use, it's there, it's easy to access, it's very simple. It was created at a time, in fact we mentioned COVID a few times. When COVID hit, we built it within a month to allow people to build their wellbeing plan. Very simple to use, but very powerful. Lots of suggestions in there, some that you'll read and say, well, I'll never do that, I'll never do that, I'll never do that, but it's got me thinking what I will do. There's a little model in there which says, think about what's going to get you through the next 30 seconds, next 3 minutes, next 30 minutes. That's a pretty good start if you can get through. So wellbeingandcoping.net is something worth looking at. But for safety plans, stayingsafe.net, that is specifically about safety plans. It really invites people in, and you don't have to use it at points of extreme distress. Actually, what we tend to say is use it when you're not, and use it just to develop your plan so that if distress happens, if challenges happen, if you become overwhelmed. So stayingsafe.net takes you through a journey to produce a safety plan, and you can print out a piece of paper and just write it, or you can do it on your own device, which, my safety plan is with me 25 hours a day in my spiritual world. It sits on my pillow, I go to bed with it, I wake up with it. If I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I am not coping that night, I just open it up and I've done the work already. In my crisis, I don't need to think about what I need to do because I've already thought about what I would do, and that's a safety plan. Okay, thank you.
That's something for you to think about. I always ask, who's got your back? That's super important. It takes me back to, I have one thing to tell you, and when I started noticing and became a bit more emotionally intelligent, I think it's someone on my station, and I haven't seen him for a while, and I've asked him, I haven't seen you for a while, where have you been? Have you been on holiday? And he wasn't smiling, and he told me, I went back home, and he was Jamaican, and I said, oh yes, you went back home, a bit of sun, and he said, no, I've lost my son, and he said, I'm struggling. And at that time, I gave him a hug. I didn't even ask, I just gave him a hug, and he told me I needed that. So that was the moment for me that I became more emotional awareness and actually started noticing other things around. So have a little think about it. Who's got your back? Who can you help? Who can you support in that moment? Now I'm going to come to you. Not all disabilities are visible, and that often means those living with hidden disabilities face unique challenges, especially when it comes to social awareness and understanding. From workplaces to public spaces, how can we create a more inclusive society that acknowledges and supports these individuals? How can businesses and public spaces become more inclusive and supportive of those with hidden disabilities in it?
So I am going to talk about the sunflower again, because we do a lot of work with businesses, and so when individuals wear the sunflower, they have to have somewhere to go that's safe, where people understand what the sunflower is. So a lot of the work that we do with businesses, they join our network, and we help to train their staff. So when a business joins our network, we ask that they train aim to train 80% of their staff as to what the sunflower is, to understand the range and the scope and the complexity of non-visible disabilities, because a lot of people will hone in on one and they don't understand that there's thousands of reasons why someone would wear a sunflower. We contacted our community a few years ago to ask them why they wore the sunflower. They submitted, I think at the time, 867 conditions and disabilities from that, and we've got that list open. We've now had, I think, around 6,000 submissions, and so the list keeps growing. We did it, and part of it was we at the time when we took the count on the list, for every disability and every submission, we created a meter. We put a meter to create the world's longest lanyard. So we've got the Guinness World Record for the world's longest lanyard. And that's a really good visual representation of non-visible disabilities, and sort of really helps to visualise that. So just going back to businesses, we'll sort of raise awareness, we'll raise awareness of non-visible disabilities, and then we'll also talk to that business about how to approach someone respectfully who's wearing the sunflower. We call it the rule of 6. We keep it quite simple, because it's, if you see someone wearing the sunflower, don't judge them. Don't judge them at all. Don't assume you know why they're wearing the sunflower, and if they share with you, we tell them not to sort of, we tell them, if you see someone wearing the sunflower, ask how you can help, and certainly don't ask why they're wearing the sunflower and what that disability is. If they choose to share that with you, don't assume you know how that disability impacts that person. It's really listen to what they say, be guided by them, and ask, just respond to what they need in that particular moment. It can change, it's not always the same, and then be kind and show respect. And that education helps organisations change their mindset around disability. It gives them a mechanism to talk about disability without focusing on it. A lot of them are terrified of getting things wrong, but by changing that conversation to what kind of support does that person need in that moment, that does open conversations around disability. We recently had an NHS trust who came back to us and said, as a result of bringing in the sunflower and creating that psychologically safe space, they had an increase in the rate of disclosure of about 25%. And what that meant for that NHS trust is they could put in accommodations for the individuals. So a lot of it is around education, is around changing the mindset within that organisation. We use the sunflower, and it's a really good stepping stone for the next, for an organisation to start moving on to the next step, to talk about language, to talk about the built environment, and to talk about sort of removing barriers.
Thank you. Anne, do you want to elaborate a bit about that? How can businesses in public spaces become more inclusive and supportive of those with visible disabilities?
First of all, I'll just draw on what Annette has said about, those safe spaces and wearing a lanyard and telling somebody, don't ask unless, the person wearing a lanyard wants to disclose their disability. I don't know how many of us in this room, disabled people, I don't know that you've experienced instances where people see you either in a wheelchair or using a walking stick, and they automatically know what is wrong with you and how they can help you. And somebody will say, oh, my grandmother uses a walking stick. Oh, my best friend uses a wheelchair. And they automatically think that your disability is the same as this disability disability of their loved one or somebody they knew. And I think, I always sort of think, oh no, we are individuals. And just because, for example, I'm in a wheelchair, it doesn't mean that my disability is the same as Dr. Nick's or the mayor's disability. We are totally different, you know. We are individuals. And I'll tell you a story when we're talking about businesses, you know, being inclusive or sort of making public places inclusive. A few years ago, I had my friend come from America. She's disabled, a very, very well-known, famous person. And together with another friend of mine, a Paralympian from here, we decided just to really go and have a good time out. You know, so we said, let's go and have a meal. Then after that, we'll go to the cinema. Then after that, we'll walk around. And the first place we went to, when they saw 3 wheelchairs, the manager came and said, oh, we cannot have 3 wheelchairs in this place because you are a fire hazard. And we thought, what? 3 wheelchairs being a fire hazard? And I, being a big mouth, I wanted to know, how am I a fire hazard? You know, just sitting in my wheelchair and wanting to have a meal. And they actually explained, oh, in case there's a fire or in case there's an emergency, we don't know how we'll help you unless you sign. They actually brought a paper for us to sign that if there was a fire, we would not expect his staff to help us. And my 2 friends were like, no, we are moving, we are going to a different place. I said, no, we are not moving. We are not going anywhere. We are staying here and we shall eat here. And I think you look at that organization, you know, you look at the manager of that public space, and when I come to you, where was the compassion? You know, and you know, when you're talking about compassion, I just realized that compassion is not something that can be taught. I think some people are just generally born with compassion, and some people will never be compassionate. It doesn't matter if you drop dead in front of them, they'll find a reason for not wanting to support you. And as someone who is disabled, I see this almost every other time, where I want to go to a public space, I cannot, you know, access it. The manager isn't willing to cooperate or even to learn. Because sometimes we often say, we can work with you, we can help you on how to make this place accessible. A few years ago, we started, I joined a campaign of the Changing Places toilets. Because these are facilities, these are like disabled toilets, but with bigger facilities of because it comes with an adult changing table for people with high needs who need to be changed when they're out. And it's when I was working on this campaign, I just realized that really our society and businesses don't sometimes think that we are valuable customers. You know, they don't think that we are valuable customers, and that's when you sort of say, well, my pound is just the same as that other pound. You know, it doesn't have a different color, it's the same as that pound. But one thing I've also come to realize is, I think, to me, is education, 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 education. We have to keep hammering this on the head all the time. And sometimes with my fellow campaigners, people feel exhausted. You know, people feel it's like, oh, we've been campaigning about access, we've been campaigning about making businesses wanting to involve us, making it more accessible, more open, so that disabled people can actually go out and, you know, get work or get into some of these venues. People are getting tired. You know, people are getting tired because it's the same story, it's the same rhetoric every day. And sometimes you start to wonder, what kind of language should we employ, or what kind of language should we use, you know, to speak to these people? And I think the encouragement is we just have to keep educating them. You know, we have to keep challenging them and asking whether they have ED&I policies, for example, on how they make their venues available or accessible to people. You know, we have to keep sending disabled people to work with them, because that is the only way we can actually break this mold. So it's not about, we shouldn't give up. You know, we shouldn't give up. It's like, it's, you know, this is what I always say to people, you know, when you are disabled, it means that every day you wake up, you're wearing boxing gloves, because you are definitely going to face a different battle. Every day, it's a different battle. So wake up in the morning, wear those boxing gloves, because you don't know what is waiting for you just after, you know, you leave your door.
Peter, do you want to say?
Yeah, thank you. And honestly, there was one thing that because I mentioned compassion earlier on, and obviously we're all here because we're here because we're motivated to care, which is a powerful aspect of compassion. And you mentioned education quite a few times. Actually, the really good news is that compassion can be taught, which is interesting. But it's not that it can be taught, it can be rekindled based on the fact that human beings are hardwired to be compassionate. Now, it's hard to believe, I know, because of the experiences that you've had and we've all had. But the reality, it is there in all of us. And there are various theories around evolutionary theories that it's come through human evolution, but also in social development. So compassion is an advantage to societies where it exists and where it's expressed. And it can be rekindled. This is the exciting thing, but there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, there are some societies across the world and regions where compassion is it just exists. There are some countries that have put compassion at the forefront of their agendas in mental health and health. You know, Australia is one example. They've got a long journey to go, but they're ahead of us. But that's the really exciting thing, that actually with the education, I know you're talking about a whole range of other things that people need to learn. So there is a hope there about compassion being rekindled in society. It's going to take some time, obviously. We've got some challenges going on at the moment. Because actually the thing that stops compassion is things that get in the way of it. And also, just the final thing I'm going to say is that some people do express their compassion. It's hard to notice, but it is still there. You know, even in the smaller sense, somebody may be motivated to care, they might be sympathetic, they might be sensitive, they might be empathic, they might not be judging. But actually, it's hard to see because so much else is getting in the way of it. But education is the key. It can be rekindled and brought to the surface in our societies piece by piece. But thank you.
I totally agree. I was in education myself as a teacher, head teacher, inclusion officer. I believe that it can be taught. It has to go back to schools and education, where those children, they grow up to become better informed adults, and therefore having that empathy towards the people that might not be at the same level of mobility as others, perhaps. We are coming towards the end, and now I would like to shift our focus to something deeply personal and ask you, what is one key message about health and well-being that you would like to share with someone who has a disability, something you believe is essential for them to know and that could positively impact their life? Now, for me, personally, if I could share just one message with anyone facing the challenges of disability, it would be this. You're not alone. Your voice matters. Your potential is limitless. Reach out, talk about your emotions, understand your emotions and feelings, because by seeking the right support, it can make the real difference. By embracing community, self-belief, and the right tools, each of us can overcome barriers and create meaningful change, because true inclusion comes from empathy, education, and from the heart. Nick.
Thank you. Follow that. Says,
I work that throughout.
near here, the Royal Hospital at Chelsea, and in 1850 there was a doctor there, Dr. McLaughlin, who said exercise of some kind or other is almost essential to the preservation of health of persons of all ages, but in none more so than in the old, and I would say, and in people with disabilities. And I don't mean be an athlete,